What is up, everybody? This is DJ Cade back once again with another Sinister Cup analysis video. And I just wanted to give you guys a disclaimer before this video gets started that if there's a specific Pokemon that you want to see, or if there's certain analysis that you might not want to hear, or if there's any particular thing that you might want to know, then just look down in the comments below. I will be leaving a comment that has links to all the different Pokemon that I will be discussing in today's video. And as always, if you enjoy what you see, please leave a like or a comment. Let me know what you guys think. If you really like it, give me that like and ring the notification, bronzong bell, whatever goofy saying I want to insert here because I haven't quite figured that out, but any support you guys can show would be awesome. And I'm not going to give you guys any sort of long introduction for today's video because our goal for this one is pretty simple. To see if there are any Pokemon amongst what we would consider the top of the meta that might be able to do without their second charge moves, at least in some circumstances. Now, for the purposes of this video, I think it's important to define what the meta is, at least in this case, for all the comparisons that we're going to do. So just to keep this short for you guys, I've decided that the meta for this video is going to consist of 21 Pokemon. And the reason I chose that number is because I just took a quick look at the overall rankings for the Sinister Cup on PvPoke. This isn't a custom rankings or anything, this is just what you can see when you go to the regular rankings page. But as I scroll down this list, all of these Pokemon in some capacity have been talked about as being very powerful Pokemon in this meta, whether or not they're some of the top Pokemon or whether they're maybe sort of considered the off-meta picks. We've had a lot of these Pokemon brought into the discussion for this meta, but when I was looking over this, it kind of hit a wall right around number 20 here, whereas once you got below the ranked number 20 Pokemon, which is Mawile or Molly in this case, but once you got below that number 20 ranking, you really wouldn't find a lot of Pokemon that would really be relevant in the meta, or they would be considered sort of off-meta picks. And there are some that I could mention, like some of the steel bug types, some of the steel grass types like Ferrothorn. Some people might consider bringing a Golurk just for the lulz. Some people are mentioning Alolan Raichu, Lucario with that Shadow Ball able to hit the ghost types. But I think a lot of these are going to be considered more off-meta picks that are really going to get countered hard by a lot of the other top Pokemon in this meta. And I think that when you go to a tournament and you have a large number of players, you're going to see a lot of the Pokemon from the top 20 on a lot of those people's teams. And if you have a lot of the Pokemon from the top 20, then you're going to be able to counter most of the things that you see below this number 20 ranking here. But I mentioned before that my meta consisted of 21 Pokemon. Would you believe me if I said Girafarig was going to be my one exception to the top 20 rule? Because I looked into this, I hear you guys out on the Discords and everything. I've looked into it and it's quite an interesting pick in this cup. It's actually going to counter quite a few things like Haunter, Poliwrath, Dusclops, Drifblim. That's a really big win for Girafarig, Gallade, and it's going to get hard countered by a lot of the things that resist that confusion damage, specifically the steel types. But Girafarig I'm going to include in the meta because I really feel that a lot of people are going to be able to use this particular off-meta pick effectively, even though it is ranked 45 in the overall rankings. So what I've done is I've actually created a custom group which consists of only these top 21 Pokemon that you are going to see. And for all of my moveset comparisons I'm going to make today, I'm going to be using this particular group of Pokemon just so we can kind of narrow down the important wins versus all of the kind of like extraneous stuff like all of the unevolved forms that get counted into the rankings, so we don't have to take any of that into consideration, because really, when are you going to run into a lot of those Pokemon? But first things first, what I want to do is just clarify that I'm not trying to say that you can afford to just not have a second charge move on a lot of these Pokemon. If you want all of your hard-earned Pokemon to be viable in this meta, you're going to need a lot of second charge moves. That's just the nature of it. I mean, there's so many Pokemon that have really diverse move sets in this meta, and some of them have different type coverages, some of them have varying strengths and varying speeds, to where some of them are going to apply a lot more shield pressure and others are going to act as more of a death blow move, or it can be more of a finisher situation, especially if the opponent has no shields. And there are a lot of them in this meta. Like, I don't want to lead any of you guys down a path where you might make a decision that's going to cost you the tournament. I'm going to say that all of these Pokemon I'm going to name off here are pretty much going to need their second charge moves, and I'm not going to talk about them too much, but a lot of these you guys are probably going to know. So right off the bat, the first 5 Pokemon, you're going to want the second charge moves for a lot of them. Haunter is going to want to have a second charge move whether or not you have that Dark Pulse or the Sludge Bomb or the Shadow Ball. You're going to want to have something there if you're going to run Haunter. I recommend the Dark Pulse, and I made an entire video about that, which I covered that whole thing with Haunter, if you need that Shadow Ball or not, and I definitely recommend you check that out if you don't have the Legacy Shadow Ball and you want to run the Haunter. It can still be a good option. And Dusclops, I thought, well, why don't you just have the Shadow Punch? You know, I mean, Ghost types aren't really resisted by anything in this meta. And the thing is that you're going to want to have the Fire Punch because that's going to do a lot of damage to those Steel types that are designed to counter the Ghost types. So actually, this is going to be a top 6. I lied about that. So the top 6 Pokemon, you're absolutely going to want to have the second charge move on them. Medicham, Frostlass, and Poliwrath, you're also going to want to have that second charge move. All of them have really good kits, and Frostlass with the Shadow Ball and the Avalanche. The Avalanche is actually going to charge at the same speed as the Crunch, so if you're worried about speed, Avalanche is still going to be a superior option to the Crunch and be able to deal neutral, if not super effective damage to a lot of the things in this meta. And then Counter / Bubble, Power Up Punch, Ice Punch, just a great kit overall for this meta, and once you get that damage rolling, each of these Pokemon are very powerful. Empoleon, you're going to want that second charge move on just because it's one of the starter Pokemon, and it's going to be a lot cheaper for you. It's only going to be 10,000 Stardust and 25 Candy, so if you happen to have a Piplup that's in that range where it can fit into the Great League as an Empoleon, then you might as well teach it that second charge move because it's absolutely not going to hurt you too much. And the thing is, in this meta, you're going to want that Flash Cannon as your most used move. And if you teach him the second charge move and you don't have the Flash Cannon, then the odds are pretty good that you're going to get the Flash Cannon as the second charge move. And if you don't, then you can guarantee that you can get that Flash Cannon with only 1 charge TM. Because we've only got 3 charge moves here, so that's really going to make it easy on your probably dwindling charge TM collection. Bronzong is going to gain a lot more versatility in this meta, having 2 charge moves, having the Bulldoze and at least the Psyshock. It's going to give it a lot better matchups against things that would normally resist the Psyshock. And on top of that, Bronzong has been a very good pick in a lot of other cups. And especially with the dual typing, I can predict that he is going to be usable in cups beyond the Sinister Cup going into Season 2. So if you need to make a second charge move investment in Bronzong, it's something that is probably going to pay off for you in the long run anyway. Gallade, I ran a few sims with Gallade already, and I gotta say that he really needs the Leaf Blade and the close combat. The Leaf Blade just being able to apply so much shield pressure, and then the close combat being a very, very strong charge move, and going to get stab damage because Gallade is also that fighting type. And even against things that will resist fighting, it's still going to do a lot of damage, and it's still going to help Gallade win a lot of matchups that he would not normally be able to win without the Leaf Blade. So once again, Gallade is going to be a candidate for a second charge move. And then Primate. The only reason Primate even makes it onto this list is because of that Legacy Cross Chop. If you happen to have a Legacy Cross Chop, then by all means invest in it, invest in that second charge move, get the Night Slash on him, because really the only other reason that Primate is really listed as high as it is because of his ability to hit those ghost types with the Night Slash and then be effective against the other things that fighting is normally effective against in this meta. Without that Night Slash, he has no other charge moves that can hit for any type of damage besides fighting. That's really the only thing that gives him the variety to be good in this meta. So you're going to want to have a second charge move, especially if you happen to have that Legacy Cross Chop. And then last but not least, Lugia, I can say, is probably going to be a much safer investment for a second charge move than a Cresselia, simply because it can get into a lot of other leagues. If you happen to have gotten a trade where you can get a Lugia that's eligible for the Great League, it's going to serve you very, very well. You'll notice I didn't talk about Cresselia, and there's a reason for that. Cresselia is going to be one of the ones that we will talk about later, but Lugia, I feel, if you're going to make the steep investment Stardust-wise and Candy-wise into a second move for a Legendary, I feel like Lugia is a lot safer investment and more of a necessary investment. Because as you can see, Lugia has the Sky Attack and the Hydro Pump, and the Sky Attack is already a fantastic PvP move. It's just one of the best ones out there, and when paired with the Dragon Tail, it's going to be a pretty good charge move. It's not going to be charging as fast as Dragon Breath and some of the other fast moves that it could potentially have, but it's still going to get to that Sky Attack fairly quick, and that's going to deal neutral or super effective damage to a lot of the things in this meta. And then especially for this meta, you're going to want to have that Hydro Pump as the secondary move, because that will allow Lugia to hit more of the tanks for super effective damage like Bastiodon and Steelix and the things that would normally counter something like Lugia. So that would give Lugia a fighting chance in those situations, especially in no shield situations. Now you're probably thinking, well, that's kind of a lot. That's almost all the Pokemon that you have listed in your top 21 meta. And the thing is that, yeah, it is a little bit much, but a lot of you who've competed in the previous seasons' cups probably have a lot of these things powered up already. And for all the newer players, I mean, there's quite a few top picks in this meta that if you really tried to power up everything on this list, then you're probably going to be pretty satisfied with how well these Pokemon will serve you later on in the season. But the goal of this video is to see which Pokemon we could save Stardust on by not adding that second charge move to, and I've decided to take the following 7 Pokemon and really put them under a microscope for this video. Cresselia, Vennett, Claydol, Gardevoir, Probopass, Mawile, or Molly? We'll discuss that. And Girafarig. So the first of those Pokemon I'd like to start with is Girafarig, simply because it's going to be the easiest for me to explain and show you guys how I'm going to do these comparisons, and also because he has the easiest moveset to kind of break down. Thunderbolt is going to be his best charge move by far, as you can see with an 87.2% usage rate, and Mirror Coat and Psychic falling pretty far behind that. Now the thing is that Mirror Coat and Psychic are both pretty terrible moves. moves, right? And I discovered that there's not really going to be much in this meta that is going to resist that Thunderbolt, maybe 2 Pokemon specifically, that Steelix and the Claydol. But so I decided to plug the numbers in, and as you can see below me in this graph, what I did was I took every single shielding situation and I have a column for running with just Thunderbolt, and then a column for running with Mirror Coat, and a column for running with Psychic. And as you can see, Psychic will pick you up 2 wins in the 2 versus 1 and 2 versus 0 shielding situations. The loss that you're going to take without it is going to be against Steelix, and in the 2 versus 1, you're actually going to lose. You're not really going to lose another match. You're actually going to tie with Claydol. So it's really interesting that you don't actually lose that, but look at how similar a lot of these charts are. In all of the 1 shield situations, in all of these 0 shield situations, Girafarig does just as well with only Thunderbolt. So this is a Pokemon that I am going to say that if you want to experiment and play around with Girafarig and see how he kind of works on your team, then don't invest in that second charge move for this one. I mean, unless you really want to get that tie with Claydol, I mean, you really shouldn't be sending in Girafarig against a Claydol anyway, because Claydol is going to resist both the Confusion and the Thunderbolt. It's just not a good matchup. And then Steelix is going to be one of the things that can hurt Girafarig anyways. I mean, in that 2 versus 0 shielding situation, that is where that extra loss is going to be with the Thunderbolt. But again, that's a poor matchup anyways. I mean, the Crunch is going to be able to hit Girafarig for super effective damage because normal types do not resist Dark. So in this case, I would say that you would be totally safe not investing in that second charge move for Girafarig. He is good to go. That's 50,000 Stardust we've saved right there. Now the next Pokemon I'd like to talk about is Molly, and I know it's probably supposed to be pronounced Mawile based on how it's spelled, but Molly is 1 less syllable and it kind of sounds like mauling something, you know, which was what I presume it can do with that mouth on the back of its head, or maybe that's the front of it, I'm really not sure. But in any case, we're just going to say Molly for the rest of this video. But one of the first things I wanted to look at with Molly is just how good Molly is going to do with 1 charge move. And the thing is that a lot of his charge moves, it's not as clear of a difference as it is with Girafarig, where Girafarig has 1 dominant charge move over all the others. All of these different charge moves for Molly can have different uses. So what I decided to do is I just decided to compare all of those charge moves on their own to the rest of this meta in this graph below me. And as you can see, what I've got right up here is the simulations for the 1v1 shield with the Iron Head. And this is the only place that Iron Head really falls short in terms of its matchups in different shielding situations. As you can see, for some reason, it takes 2 less wins than Vice Grip. It might just have something to do with how fast Vice Grip is over the Iron Head, but in most cases, Iron Head is going to give you more wins in a lot of different categories. As you can see, those 2 shield situations where Molly has 2 shields, the Iron Head is going to do a lot better. The Iron Head is also going to be the best in the 0 shields across the board situation, and it's also going to be one of the best in the 1 versus 0 shield situation. So there are a lot of places where Iron Head comes through as the best charge move, but it's by a very, very narrow margin. I mean, keep in mind, Vice Grip only costs 40 energy, Iron Head costs 50, and Play Rough costs 60. And each time you use Bite, it only generates 2 energy. So even though it is a very fast move, even though it's a very high damaging move, it just does not give you hardly any energy. So that difference between the Vice Grip and the Iron Head and the Play Rough is actually going to be pretty noticeable. But just the fact that Iron Head is able to do a lot more damage, it's going to get the stab bonus with Molly also being the steel typing, but it's just a really close tie between all of the charge moves. I mean, if you wanted to, you could use the Play Rough and you could get stab type damage that way, and you could hit the opponent really hard with that. So if you wanted to use Molly in like a closer type situation and just be able to hit things with Play Rough, that's also an option. So it just all depends on how you want to play it, and I really can't recommend one specific charge move over the other, but the whole point of this video, like I said, is to see if we can not buy a second charge move. So I'm actually going to do a second graph for Molly that shows all the combinations of his second charge moves. And as you guys can see, after we generate all of those results for those numbers, the extra charge move really doesn't help Molly in a lot of situations. I mean, if you take a look at the 2v2 and the 0 versus 2 and the 0 versus 1, I mean, we get the exact same amount of wins in every single one of those categories with or without a second charge move. And if you take a look at some of the other ones, like, for example, Iron Head in the 0 versus Iron Head and Vice Grip in the 0 versus 0, we start to notice some weird things with the simulator. It actually gives us one less win with Iron Head and Vice Grip in the 0 versus 0 shield situation. Now, why is that? It's kind of like, well, we have the extra charge move. Shouldn't we be able to do more? Well, I think it might have something to do with the way charge moves are baited with the simulations. I'm not really entirely sure why it's giving us one less win, but what that tells me is that it's probably a tie with something, or if you played it a little bit differently, you probably could win that particular situation that you lost out on. But I mean, look at, like, in the 1 versus 0 shield situation, there's different distributions of wins and losses, but the most for either category is only 15. If you look at the 1v1, yes, the Iron Head and Vice Grip is definitely a help in the 1v1, but again, it's only 12 wins, and you can get 12 wins with just the Vice Grip. In the 1v2 shield situation, look, it's either 10 wins or 11 wins, no matter what charge moves you have, whether it's just a single charged move or you have 2 charge moves on Molly. In fact, the only situation in which a second charge move is going to significantly help Molly is going to be in the 2 versus 0 shield situation. As you can see, we get a couple more wins across the board with a lot of the charge moves, but it's really not by a huge margin. It's just not really significant enough to really warrant bringing in the second charge move. And that is because when you're considering Molly for your team, you're really considering Molly for that bite damage, because Dark is still going to be a very strong typing in this meta. It's going to be able to hit both Ghost and Psychic, and with just the speed and raw damage of that bite, that's going to be where you win most of your matchups. And like I said, it's a slow charging fast move. So you're not going to be able to get to a charge move before your opponent can get to 2 or 3 if they're a particularly fast spamming Pokemon. So in the end, would I recommend a second charge move for Molly? And I don't know. I mean, it's really close, but like when you look at this, like, you're just not going to get that much of an advantage out of having a second charge move. The number of wins you're going to get and the different specific situations in which different combinations do better than other combinations and take out some Pokemon more than others. It's just all so trivial in this case, to the fact that, you know, you really just bring in Molly for the bite. So I don't know. I honestly can't recommend putting a second charge move on a Molly either. And I think the other reason I can't recommend it is because it is a 75,000 Stardust charge move, which makes it a fairly expensive investment. And for all that investment, do you really want to like pick up maybe like 1 or 2 wins? I mean, you guys can double check a lot of these for yourself on PvPoke if you want to, but like in this case, this is another Pokemon where I gotta say, like, maybe it would be a good idea to just go with the Iron Head. It's going to give you the best balance of damage and speed, so to speak. It's going to be right in the middle in terms of the other 2 charge moves, and that's personally what I'd recommend. And I'd say that since Molly isn't really a top pick, just try it out at first without the Iron Head. If you really like it, if you really think you need that second charge move, you can always invest in it later. Now the next Pokemon I'd like to talk about is Vennett, and don't worry, this one isn't going to take too long. So obviously you want to use that Shadow Claw, no question about that, but when it comes to the charge moves, I mean, you take a look at these percentages, 98.4% for the Shadow Ball. That's a pretty high usage rating. So this is a Pokemon that I was really excited to put through the rigors in all of the different shielding situations. And as you can see from this graph that I have below me, there is literally only one situation in this entire meta where it would benefit you to add that second charge move, and that is in the 0 versus 0 shield situation. And the only thing you're going to lose against without an extra charge move, in this case Thunder is what's recommended, is going to be against Girafarig. That's it. And it makes sense as to why, because think about it. I mean, Shadow Ball has a ton of damage. It is easily the fastest charge move in Vennett's arsenal, and it's going to get stab damage on top of that. So the situations where you wouldn't want to use the Shadow Ball are just so vast and so few and far in between. In this case, I've calculated it down to being only Girafarig in that one situation. So I guess if you really think it's worth it to spend 50 or 75,000 Stardust, whatever it is, to power up that Vennett to get that second charge move so you can win that one matchup in that one situation, then by all means you go right ahead. If you've just got more Stardust than you know what to do with, then by all means teach him a second charge move, but really Vennett does not need it, and it's such a clearer case than any of the other Pokemon we've looked at so far. Do yourself a favor, save the Stardust from that Vennett. And since I just went over and looked at my phone and cheated, I found out it's actually 50,000 Stardust. So far, if we're not adding the second charge move to Girafarig, Vennett, or Molly, then that's 175,000 Stardust saved so far out of our meta of 21 Pokemon. And that's pretty good. So why don't we move on to our next Pokemon, since I don't want to linger on this guy too much longer. And that Pokemon is going to be Gardevoir. Now, Gardevoir is another one of these Pokemon that is mostly defined by the fast move. In this case, Charm. And just to save you guys the trouble, I ran a lot of simulations with Charge Beam and a lot of simulations with Confusion, and Charm just wins so many more matchups. It's in huge margins of like 3 to 5 wins in some categories. So Charm is going to be the fast move that you want. It's just going to make Gardevoir the most flexible Pokemon and just give her the most power in this meta. But what I decided to do is I decided to try and figure out, well, which is going to be the best charge move if you're only going to have one charge move. It was kind of a toss-up between Shadow Ball and Synchronoise. Now the thing is, Shadow Ball is clearly going to win in some situations, especially in the 2 versus 0 and the 1 versus 0, but Synchronoise is actually going to pick up one win over Shadow Ball in the 0 versus 0 shield situation against Lugia. And I think the reason is because Synchronoise can just be gotten to a little bit faster than any of Lugia's charge moves. So in that particular situation, Gardevoir will come out ahead simply because she is able to hit that Lugia before that Lugia can hit her. We also have an interesting option with Return here, which is a lot faster move, and something that might actually pair well with Gardevoir, give Gardevoir a little bit more shield pressure. So I'm going to once again expand this chart below me to include another chart which has the different combinations of Shadow Ball Synchronoise, Shadow Ball Return, and Synchronoise and Return, if you are lucky enough to have that, just to see how those things compare with each other in this meta. And after we finish with all of our comparisons in these rankings, as you can see, you may see a lot of green on this graph here, but don't be fooled, because if you take a look at the numbers for Shadow Ball and Synchronoise versus just having only Shadow Ball on Gardevoir, you will see that the only place that Gardevoir picks up even one win is in the 0 versus 0 shield category, with having both the Shadow Ball and the Synchronoise. That is not very much, and that's only because we're basically combining the best of both worlds in that 0 versus 0 shield category by having both the Shadow Ball and Synchronoise on Gardevoir in this case. Now, if you look at the other shielding categories with like Shadow Ball and Return and Synchronoise and Return, you're going to see that those movesets in a lot of cases perform even worse than having only one charge move. And again, I don't know if that's just because of the way the shield baiting works in these simulations, but as you can see with Synchronoise and Return, if that moveset is even possible, I'm not entirely sure that Synchronoise and Return is even possible on Gardevoir, because the Shadow Ralts might have been released after the community day, so that, keep in mind, that column might not be possible, but if it were, it's really not even that great of a moveset anyways, and it looks like you're really losing out compared to just having Shadow Ball, or let's say, in this case, you had a really good IV Gardevoir left over from community day, and it happened to have both Charm and Synchronoise on it. You know, I would say in this case, just having either just Shadow Ball or, you know, just Synchronoise would probably be good enough on Gardevoir, considering that the Charm damage is going to be so much of what makes Gardevoir great. So even though optimally I'm going to say Shadow Ball is what you're going to want, and that's great because that means you can find a really good PvP IV Gardevoir for the Great League even now, even without having to have the community day, and you can also save a ton of Stardust on that second charge move. And keep in mind, for Ralts, it's 75,000 candy for that second charge move. So, do you really want to spend that much candy in order to have a couple more wins in a couple more categories, you know, with the Shadow Ball or whatever, or do you just want to stick with your community day Gardevoir and use it primarily for the charm damage in its best matchups? Because if you do, that's going to save you, like I said, another 75,000 Stardust, which brings our running total to 250,000 Stardust saved in second charge moves. So, these were the easy ones. These first 4 Pokemon were the easy ones, but our analysis is going to get a little bit tougher as we go along. So the next Pokemon I'm going to look at is going to be Probopass, because he had one of the most confusing movesets as far as breaking down which one is going to be the best and if we can do without a second charge move, because a lot of his moves have really good coverage in this meta. Both the electric type and the rock type moves are going to do lots of damage in the hands of Probopass, but I really didn't know a lot about his kit, unlike the other Pokemon in this meta where you could kind of take one look at them and figure out what their movesets are. I really wanted to break down Probopass in every single detail so you guys would know exactly what's up. And the first thing I did was actually compared his fast moves, Spark and Rock Throw, and wouldn't you believe it, his fast moves actually have almost the same number of wins in almost every single category. In fact, I didn't compare every single shielding situation with Spark and Rock Throw with all of his moves, but I couldn't find a single shield situation in which Spark does significantly better than Rock Throw. They pretty much tied in every single shield situation that I looked at. It's just that each of the fast moves are going to be a little bit different. Spark is going to be better against the tanks, such as other things like other Probopass, Bastiodon. He's also going to be able to do a little bit more damage against the water types. And then Rock Throw is also going to do very significant damage to Drifblim, and it's going to give him better matchups against Frostlass and Alolan Marowak. So it's kind of a trade-off, like which fast move do you want, which matchups do you see Probopass being in. Both fast moves are very good, so for the purposes of all of our simulations, we've just decided to go with Spark as the fast move when we run all of these. And of course the first thing we did was compare each one of the charge moves individually to see if Probopass could rock with just one charge move. And as you can see from this graph, we have a clear winner here. I mean, we have Rock Slide beating out the competition in almost every single category. Rock Slide is going to be the move that you want if you can only afford one charge move on your Probopass. But like all my other Pokemon with sort of kind of questionable movesets, I really wanted to see how the dual charge movesets would compare to the single charge movesets, and that's exactly what I did here. If you'll allow me to bring this up and obscure my face once again. And as you can see for all the dual charge move Probopass, we do see some similar numbers in a lot of cases, but when you look at that Rock Slide and Thunderbolt combination, it is clearly the winner. It is going to have more wins than any other combination of charge moves. It is going to have more wins than just the Rock Slide on its own in almost every single category. In fact, yeah, I think in every single category, it's going to have more wins than the Rock Slide, and it's just going to be just the superior moveset. So we did the deep dive in this case into Probopass's moves, and you know what, it's kind of interesting that we were sort of able to prove that maybe the Rock Slide and Magnet Bomb is not the optimum moveset, because as you can see, the Rock Slide Magnet Bomb is taking one more loss in a lot of categories than the Rock Slide and Thunderbolt. So now you guys know that if you want to be running that Probopass, you're probably going to be wanting to run the Thunderbolt. And the thing is, we set out on this video to determine if you needed that second charge move on that Pokemon, and I'm going to say that for Probopass, you're probably going to want that second charge move. The numbers don't lie, we just have so many more wins with having the Rock Slide and Thunderbolt. But the good news is that if you want to invest in that Probopass, it's going to be a very, very good pick long term. With being both the Rock and the Steel type, I can again foresee it being a very good pick for many, many future Cups. The next Pokemon I'm going to look at is Claydol, and the reason I wanted to look at Claydol is because I see a really high percentage usage rate on Earth Power, and I figured his second most used charge move was the Earthquake, so I really wanted to compare all of these moves, and I really wanted to do 4 specific comparisons. One with just Earth Power, and then one with Earth Power Earthquake, Earth Power Gyro Ball, and Earth Power with Psychic, which is what I put into the table below me. Now, for my fast move, I've decided to only use Confusion because I ran a few sims, and in almost all cases, Claydol just does better by having that Confusion, just winning a whole lot more matchups. And so I decided that Confusion was going to be my basis of comparison for this chart. Now, as you can see, it's definitely going to be a little bit of an advantage for you to put both Earth Power and Earthquake onto your Claydol. The only situations where it would really benefit you to have either Gyro Ball or Psychic are in the 2-0 shield situation, and I think that's just because that's going to give you a lot more type coverage in those situations, but in general, that Earth Power Earthquake is going to give you at least one more win across the board. But this is one of those situations where I can't really recommend that you either do or don't put the second charge move onto your Claydol. And the reason I say that is, yes, while Claydol does pick up some wins, it's not actually that many, and it's not really by a huge margin. I mean, in the 1v1 shield situation, he does pick up 2 extra wins with the Earthquake, but it's really not that huge of a difference. I mean, I'm not going to tell you not to invest the second charge move for Claydol. I'm just going to leave this one up in the air. I'm not going to say it's required, but I'm also not going to say that it's going to be Stardust saved for us either. So I'm not going to count it in either direction. My recommendation for Claydol is just to get the Confusion and the Earth Power onto him first, so that way you can test to see if this is something that's working for you in the meta, because just like a lot of the other Pokemon that we've discussed so far as their second charge move viability, a lot of them do rely on their fast move damage. Molly with Bite, Gardevoir with Charm, and in this case, Claydol with Confusion. So in this one, it's just going to be a huge I don't know, maybe? Like, maybe you want to put that second charge move if you find it's really working with your team. I will say that this is yet another Pokemon that is going to be useful in a lot of different metas. So if you choose to invest, you likely won't be disappointed in the future, but I'm just going to say that just based on the chart here and the number of wins you pick up with Earthquake, it's just such a strong maybe. So if you're really feeling putting that second charge move on there, don't let me stop you. Alright, so after running a lot of calculations and a lot of sims, the last Pokemon we're going to be talking about is Cresselia, because I wanted to take a look over Cresselia's moveset, because a lot of Cresselia's moves are very expensive in terms of their energy. Now, you would think that according to those usage percentages that Psycho Cut would actually be the stronger choice for Cresselia, but in this case I'm going to save you guys a little bit of time. I went ahead and ran some simulations with both Confusion and Psycho Cut with a variety of different movesets, and Confusion is just a lot better. It's going to take you 2 or 3 more wins in a lot of different categories and just generally be stronger and just be able to win you a lot more matchups. So I did all of my simulations with Confusion. But what you have to consider is with Cresselia's charge moves is that all of them are fairly expensive, and if you are running Confusion, then it's going to be a very, very small difference between the charge moves. In fact, it's going to take the same number of Confusions to get to both Future Sight and Moonblast, but it's going to take you 1 less Confusion to get to Aurora Beam. So if you're running that Confusion, the Aurora Beam is going to be a little bit faster of an option. And when I saw that, and when I thought to myself, well, they're suggesting Future Sight and Moonblast for this moveset, like, why wouldn't you include Aurora Beam? Wouldn't it be good against some of the things in the meta? And it just gave me a headache when I looked at Cresselia's moveset. So I really wanted to dive deeper into this and really see how many things we win and lose in various shielding situations. And I started by just doing the singular charge moves below, if you're only running 1 charge move. And as you can see, there are very few, very subtle differences between all the charge moves. In the situations where the opponent does not have any shields, all of those more expensive charge moves are going to be more valuable in those situations. But in the 2v2 in the lead situation, Aurora Beam is going to be a lot more valuable on Cresselia. But when it comes to a lot of the other shielding situations, there's actually no difference across the board. So I just thought to myself, I can't even really recommend a singular charge move on Cresselia. Like, I suppose if I were to pick either one or the other, I would want to either pick the Aurora Beam for the speed, or I would want to pick the Future Sight for the stab move damage. But even then, it's a toss-up between Future Sight and Moonblast, because you have to consider that more things in this meta are going to resist the Future Sight, then the Moonblast. So it's kind of one of these things where it's like, even then, like, you really have to consider the matchups, and you really have to study those with Cresselia, and that isn't the exact purpose of this video. It's just to give you guys an idea of the general wins and point out some matchups if I see them. I could spend a lot of time combing through this, but again, the differences are so small. So just to help us out here, why don't we bring up all of the rankings for the dual charge moves here. And I know that wasn't the smoothest transition, but as you can see, we've got a few more wins across the board when you start adding a second charge move. Like, each one of these is going to be very good. Future Sight and Moonblast, the recommended move set on PvPoke, is going to be very good. And also Moonblast and Aurora Beam is going to be very good in certain shielding situations, as you can see, eking out more wins, but being generally worse in that 2 versus 0 shield situation. But otherwise, the Moonblast and Aurora Beam is very strong. So if I was going to make a recommendation on a second charge move, I would actually go with Moonblast and Aurora Beam in this case. But again, this is one of those things where it's all down to personal play style. Now, just taking a look at the two charts, we do pick up more wins across the board in 1v1 and in 0 versus 0, especially when you add a second charge move to Aurora Beam, and then also in the 2v1 shield situation. And you really don't see much of a change in the 2 versus 0 shield situation. So again, just to bring this down so you can see my face here, that this is another one of these situations where I am just completely baffled on whether or not I should recommend the second charge move, because you also have to consider this is a legendary Pokemon, 100,000 Stardust, 100 candy. That's not going to be too easy for most people to get and just expend very easily. But the thing is, here's what I'm going to recommend with Cresselia, alright? It does take a lot of effort to try and get a Cresselia into the Great League. I mean, I'm sure the people who have been frequently trading for one have probably gotten one already, but if you're new to this thing and you're just trying to get yourself a Great League Cresselia, it's going to be tough. You're going to have to spend some Stardust on special trades with great friends, at least, to give you the best odds and the best savings when you're trying to get that Cresselia. So, in my opinion, if you can manage to get one, it might be worth your Stardust investment just to put the second move on it. But just once again, bringing this back up, based on how many things we win and lose in this meta, I mean, we pick up a couple more wins with Moonblast paired with Future Sight, but really not too many. Just a couple more in the 1 versus 0 shield situation, and one more in the 2 versus 1. But again, that's a lot of Stardust, and it's in one of these categories. It's kind of like Claydol, like we just talked about, where I just can't fully recommend it, but I can't also fully recommend that you don't spend the Stardust to get the second charge move. So that is my final verdict on Cresselia. You're going to have to feel it out. You're going to have to see if you have the Stardust to spare. If you do, and if you have the Cresselia, you might want to go for it for future metas. So that is it, guys. That is it for my analysis in this video. And to answer the question of if there are any Pokemon that you can afford not to have the second charge move on, I think we've come to the conclusion that there are at least 4 really solid top meta options that you can afford to completely forego that second charge move, and those are going to be Vennett, Gardevoir, Molly, and Girafarig. So with these Pokemon, like, you might decide later on that you like them enough that you want to give them the second charge move. But for now, give them a try without that second charge move. See how well these 4 Pokemon do in your team without it. I mean, if you decide not to give them the second charge move, it's going to save you 250,000 Stardust powering stuff up for this cup. So just keep that in mind. All of that is second charge moves that you could be spending on a Drifblim or a Haunter or a Medicham, let's say, if you don't have one. So just consider that, keep that in mind for the future cups. As for the other analysis, we determined that for Probopass, you are going to want that second charge move. And when it comes to Claydol and Cresselia specifically, these 2 Pokemon, it's just really iffy if you want to put that second charge move on there. I mean, just between the cost of Cresselia and the minimal amount of wins that you will pick up with Claydol from that second charge move, whether or not it's an Earthquake or not, it's just such a fine line with those 2 Pokemon. You know, unlike any of the other Pokemon in this meta where I just can't recommend it one way or the other. So once again, that is it for this video, and that is it for this meta-analysis. So get out there, you guys, earn those second charge moves. Don't waste your Stardust on second charge moves where you don't need them. Good luck in your future Sinister Cups. The next things coming on this channel are going to be more battles with some more people on Discord, some more people that I know locally, and maybe some people that might even be YouTubers. We'll see what's going on there. I've got some things in the works. But until then, take care, you guys. I love you all. Peace.